Hi, it's Rachel Maldonado. Belief in the human spirit and desire to connect is the reason that I want to tell your story in mine. And I want to tell you the behind the scenes story on my podcast episode 31 with Dr. Peter McCullough. It is quite the ride, and this story's podcast episode 31 is a must listen. There is so much information. It is so hopeful, and you will love it. What happened is that I made a new friend, and this new friend messaged me once and said, you should have Dr. Peter McCullough on your stories podcast. And I just thought this individual was talking shop, knows that I love freedom, am a patriot, and thought that, hey, we'd be a good match. But I just thought we were talking, and I said, of course, I would love that. That would be amazing. And I listened to all 2 hours and 45 minutes of the podcast episode on Spotify, 1747, with Joe Rogan and Dr. Peter McCullough. That episode had 40 million views in the first 2 weeks it was released. So I had listened to Dr. McCullough, very smart individual, doctor who cares about his patients. So I said, of course, that would be amazing. I would love that. I didn't really think anything would come of it. I thought we were just talking. So he brought it up to me, this individual, a couple times. And every time I said, yes, that would be amazing. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And I thought nothing of it, And then one day I get in my email. This individual had emailed me and copied Dr. Peter McCullough, sent a lovely email, introduced me, said the most amazing things about our friendship. And of course, I was like, oh, wow, he meant it. This wasn't just a talk shop, shoot the breeze. He actually emailed Dr. McCullough and introduced me. So I emailed and I said, hey, I'm a baby podcaster, but I love freedom. And, I have had an Emmy winner, an Olympian, Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot, and Ozzy Osbourne, and John Dent, who played on stage with Metallica, and John Azuna, martial artist, who worked with Keanu Reeves on Matrix 4. So I'm a baby podcaster, but I like interesting guests. And that was that. Sent my email, hey, this is me, baby podcaster. And I got an email back, and it went from there. It really went from there. But Dr. Peter McCullough, he is the busiest man on the planet. He is speaking, he is traveling, and, he is a contributor on the news. He's just insanely busy. And so my friend who had connected me to Dr. McCullough has said, oh, it might be a while, And I was like, yeah, I know. And then it worked out that Dr. Peter McCullough was coming to Chicago. He had a speaking engagement in Illinois. And he's like, hey, maybe you can pick me up. And I was like, well, of course, I will clear my Saturday for you. Just so you know, I usually only drive with my friends because I'm actually a terrible driver. But if you don't fear for your life, sure. And I said, hey, can I record a Stories podcast episode? And he's like, yeah, you have to be in the car. I thought he was coming in a hotel the night before. I thought I would have time to record my Stories podcast. And no, not at all. Dr. Peter McCullough flying in, flying out the same day. The only time he has for me is in the car. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a horrible driver, and I'm not sure how I'm going to record, but whatever, all right, okay. It turns out that he ended up having a ride transport, and he said that I could ride with him, and we'd just record in the car ride. I was like, okay. And you know, my tripod, actually, it's broken. There's a piece that's loose, and I was like, oh, I hope it doesn't fall off. But all right, let's see what happens. So I had a premonition. I was like, you know what? I'm just a little worried. And so the day before, I talked to my friend, Jamie Rodriguez. We talk every week. And I said, hey, pray for me tomorrow. I didn't tell him why. He said, pray for me. And I got a text message in the morning saying, you know, track the flight, this is the terminal, whatever. I glanced at it real quick, and it was an hour earlier than I thought, you know, what I had originally thought. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get going, get in the shower. Like, I didn't pay attention to the text so much because I just saw the time was like, I better, go. So I grabbed my tripod, I record Stories podcast in person off my phone, got my phone. I needed to do the GPS to get to O'Hare Airport. I stopped for coffee. I'm at the grocery store at Starbucks, and my phone like completely shuts down. It's a long story, but anyway, I could not get it to work. I'm like, how am I supposed to get to the airport? Because in addition to not being a good driver, I'm horrible with directions. I am the worst. So finally, I am running, I have to go. I have to be at the airport. And Dr. Peter McCullough had told me, hey, don't be late. He has a speaking engagement. He has to jet. So this is not like it's my sister. She'll wait for me. Like, no, this is someone that I gotta meet and I gotta be on time. So I went up to a guy in the grocery store and I said, look, I gotta get to the airport. Please, can you just look up, on your phone directions to the airport? So I wrote it down and I was jittery. I'm like, this is not going well because I'm thinking, how am I going to find Dr. McCullough at the airport? I have no phone. I don't even know like a number. I don't have anything memorized. What am I going to do? But I know I got to get to the airport. So I'm like, well, first things first. So because I was jittery, because I'm horrible with directions, I'm like looking at my paper. I miss a turn. I have to stop at a gas station. Now I go up to another guy and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get to the airport. I missed my turn, and the pen doesn't work to write down directions. So I was like, oh. So anyway, so finally get back on the highway, go to the airport. I get in and I have my tripod, I have my phone, and I see another guy. Now this is the third stranger that I have approached inside of an hour, and I'm like, hey, are you good with phones? And he's like, yeah, I'm good with phones. And I'm like, I just need a reboot, a hard reset to start my phone. He can't get it either. But he's helping me, and so he's like, I used to work at an airport. There are 5 terminals. One, you got to get on a shuttle to, get to the other side. And so I'm just trying to guess, like, what did Dr. McCullough say to me? Which terminal? There's 5, and they're not all in a row. Like, one you have to take a shuttle to get. And I think, okay, it must be the other terminal. Let's go. And then we rush. The guy is still trying to help me with the phone. He's been trying for 40 minutes, to try to get this to work. And then we get up to the elevator, and I'm like, oh, what's next? He's like, well, we would have to wait for the shuttle. And I'm like, no, Dr. McCullough, he's getting off the plane in 5 minutes. There is no time for shuttle. Let's just go back to the other terminal. And by this point, because this guy is trying to help me with my phone, I am devastated because I think it's just incredibly rude to have someone waiting for you at the airport. They do not have time. They cannot wait around for you. I am devastated because you cannot have someone waiting for you at the airport and they need to get to a speaking engagement and just not show up. To me, this is incredibly unacceptable. And then I'm devastated because I think, this Stories podcast episode, the Stories podcast is my baby, and every guest is important to me. And this message from Dr. Peter McCullough, it is important. So I really wanted to record this Stories podcast episode. So I am devastated. I am practically want to cry because there are 5 terminals. I have no phone. I have no way to contact Dr. McCullough. And, I know that the plane has landed and I am just standing there and I think, this might not happen. I'm at the airport, but I will not, connect with Dr. McCullough. Then I see Dr. McCullough walking towards me. I could not believe it. I rushed over and I gave that man such a tight hug. I was so relieved. I thought it was a miracle. Like, I straight up thought it was a miracle. And so, I met Dr. McCullough. I thanked the guy that helped me, that tried to get my phone to work. And, we got in the car to go to the speaking engagement. And Dr. McCullough, he puts on the song by Jimmy Levy and High Rise, and he said, hey, we got to listen to this song. I was just in Washington, D.C., the Defeat the Mandate rally, last weekend, and Jimmy Levy and High Rise, they sang this song there. And so we listened to the song, and I just felt like, even though we had, be casual friends, I just felt like this is a good soul. I connect. And so we then decided to do the Stories podcast. He's like, well, I'll just use my phone because I have no phone. Like, I have no phone. So I have the tripod in the car. It's just it's tight quarters. And I was like, let's switch seats because maybe, this is a tighter quarter. Like, I'm by the tripod. And the tripod, it's just not working. The car's moving and the tripod is like moving. It's not working. And so finally I just put the phone, behind the seat in front of me, and lock it in. And it is 21 minutes, one take. And Dr. McCullough, off 3 days of straight travel and a week where he has given Senate testimony and where he has been at the DC rally, he does 21 minutes that are fire. So much good information. And I could not believe it that I met Dr. McCullough. I did not miss that connection, and that the Stories podcast got recorded. And, on the way back to the airport, I turned to say goodbye. And Dr. McCullough was like, when I met you, you were dropping F-bombs. And I don't remember that part because it was such a blur. I was devastated in my mind. I thought I missed this connection. I will not meet Dr. McCullough at the airport. Yeah, I cannot find him. What am I going to do? So I kind of, it's a blur. I don't remember that part. But I do remember that when I had calmed down, I was so happy. I remembered the airport that Dr. McCullough had said, oh, you're very tiny in person. And it's true. I might be the smallest person you've ever met. I am very, very short. And it was just the most surreal meeting. And, I worked on the Stories podcast episode the next day. I added the music. And I actually created a Bitchute and Rumble account just for Dr. McCullough's Stories Podcast episode 31 because I usually release on Spotify and iTunes and the video versions on YouTube. And I knew that wasn't going to fly. It just was not going to work. So after I put it up, my friend, Jamie Rodriguez, he messaged me and said, hey, what happened? And I sent him the Stories podcast episode, and I said, hey, this is what happened. And I told him, and Jamie said, you know, I prayed for you. And it almost made me cry because Jamie didn't know who I was meeting. He didn't know that I would have that trouble, but I'd asked him, hey, you know, can you pray for me tomorrow? I must have had a premonition. And he did. And I wonder if the reason that I was at the right terminal out of 5 with no phone and no way to contact Dr. McCullough is possibly because Jamie prayed for me. And this Stories podcast episode, it is fire. I titled it and I put Dr. Peter McCullough's story, his relentless pursuit. And the reason I put relentless in the title is because a few days prior, he had messaged me that. He said, be relentless. And he said it twice in the episode. He talked about being relentless. This Stories podcast, episode 31 with Dr. Peter McCullough, it is fire. And you will want to hear his message. It is about joy, hope, freedom, and you will love it.